Rachel, you know, I usually show up here with nothing planned to say to you, and I listen to what's going on, and then but tonight, I actually showed up with something planned to say.
Okay.
And you ruined it, because I just listened. Again, Rachel.
Bless our hearts and other parts.
All right, but I didn't know I could get you to say that again. Okay.
Regretting it immediately.
I'm gonna try to say the thing I planned to say.
Okay.
Okay. And what I planned to say is, wouldn't it be nice if it was just completely, totally, absolutely impossible to suspect that Vladimir Putin orchestrated what happened in Syria this week so that his friend in the White House could have a big night with missiles and all of the praise he's picked up over the last 24 hours. Wouldn't it be so nice if you couldn't even in your wildest dreams imagine a scenario like that?
Wouldn't it be great if we could go back to Wag the Dog being a being a sitcom plot, you know?
Exactly. And I don't know what it is. Is it a 2% chance? Is it a 50% chance? I don't know. But I don't think it's a 0% chance. And it used to be with every other president prior to Donald Trump.
Yeah. And the question of how we will ever find out whether or not that's true is inexorably intertwined with the ongoing counterintelligence investigation of this president's campaign in terms of whether or not he colluded with Russia.
Yeah.
So maybe eventually we'll get an answer to that from Jim Comey.
We will wait.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, when Bill Clinton fired missiles during his presidency, Republicans questioned that. They questioned whether that was to distract attention from the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and that was a legitimate question. You couldn't possibly get through covering that story without having that question come up, because the president was deeply involved in a scandal. And the missiles changed the subject, as the missiles always do. Missiles always change the subject. And so tonight, we have some questions about the motivations of everyone involved in what has happened inside Syria.
The United States took a very measured step last night. We are prepared to do more.
She's clearly telegraphing a deeper involvement in Syria, which, again, several days ago was not a key priority for the Trump administration.
Thank you very much.
I'm distrustful of how quickly he switched. I don't know what his motivations were.
It is frankly not helpful to launch a small-scale attack and then continue a policy of denying exit from Syria to the millions of children and parents.
I think the president owes it to the American people to come to Congress and present a plan.
This is not one of the vital U.S. national security interests. North Korea is. Iranian nukes are.
I believe lots of very potentially bad problems will be going away.
I think that, frankly, if there's a danger right now, it would be that the U.S. is expressing too much confidence.
There's a reason it's been hard to figure this out. It is very complicated, and there are millions of people suffering in the meanwhile.
It's perfect. Just perfect. I wish it wasn't. If Vladimir Putin, if Vladimir Putin masterminded the last week in Syria, he has gotten everything he could have asked for. Vladimir Putin was essentially the man in charge of making sure that Syria got rid of all of its chemical weapons under a deal with the Obama administration. And so it makes perfect sense to question whether President Bashar al-Assad would have checked with his most important patron, Vladimir Putin, before using chemical weapons that Vladimir Putin was supposed to have helped get rid of. It would be terribly embarrassing to Vladimir Putin if President Assad had exposed Vladimir Putin as having completely failed to get rid of those chemical weapons. You wouldn't want to be Bashar al-Assad in a conversation with Vladimir Putin after that, unless you had a conversation with him before that. Unless Vladimir Putin said, I have an idea. Go ahead. Do a small chemical attack, nothing like the big ones you've done in the past. just big enough to attract media attention so that my friend in the White House will see it on TV. And then Donald Trump can fire some missiles at Syria that'll do no real damage. And then the American news media will change the subject from Russian influence in the Trump campaign and the Trump transition and the Trump White House. It's perfect. It doesn't just change the subject. For most of the news media, it changes the conventional wisdom about the dynamic between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. President Trump has finally dared to do something that Vladimir Putin doesn't like. It changes everything. As long as you never question whether Vladimir Putin wanted all of this to happen this week. And when you question that and you look at what has happened, it's always worth remembering that if Vladimir Putin really does have ways, known or unknown, to Donald Trump to influence Donald Trump, then every day that is a good day for President Trump is a good day for President Putin. Now, not one word that I've just said could possibly have been said about any president prior to Donald Trump. Don't you miss those days when, if there was a chemical attack in Syria, you could be absolutely sure that President Assad and President Putin did not do that in order to help the image of the President of the United States? That is the world that Donald Trump has given us. That is the range of possibility Donald Trump has given us. You will hear opinion in this hour that is counter to the possible that I've just outlined. But what you won't hear is proof that that scenario that I've just outlined is impossible. Because what the presidency of Donald Trump has shown is that with Donald Trump, anything is possible. You have heard in the last 25 hours pundits on television reaching for the momentous, as they always do. Reaching for the line that, for better or worse, will get your attention. And so you have heard the profound pronouncement that last night Donald Trump became president of the United States. You should all be used to that by now. That whenever Donald Trump does something routine, something that most presidents would have done, pundits will rush to the microphone to marvel at how presidential the president has become. And they will all, within a matter of days, be embarrassed by the least presidential person ever to occupy the White House. We went through this cycle before when the president gave an address to Congress and read every word in his teleprompter, after which he was instantly declared to have just become president of the United States. And 4 days after that, he tweeted, "Terrible, just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." And so we now await that next round of embarrassment for pundits. And we look back on the days when we could be absolutely certain, and I mean 100% certain, that Vladimir Putin did not conspire to kill people as a way of helping the image of the President of the United States. Joining us now, David Corn, the Washington bureau chief from Other and MSNBC political analyst, Rick Wilson, Republican strategist and contributor to the Daily Beast. Also with us, Indira Lakshmanan, Washington columnist for the Boston Globe. She's also with the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. And Indira, I raise this and I raise it without assigning a statistical probability to it. I don't know what it is. I just know that it's not zero, and it should be zero. It has been zero with every previous president. But when you look at the way the events have unfolded this week, Donald Trump could not have asked for a better end of the week for his presidency as he sees it.
Well, Lawrence, this is, of course, the problem with credibility, that when any White House or any politician has a problem with telling the truth or is caught in repeated lies, then, of course, the public is going to have trouble believing them. And that's why the scenario that you spun, while I don't abide by it necessarily or don't put credence in it, nobody, as you say, can say that it's untrue. We have no way of disproving it. And the fact that anyone would think it at all possible is because we have reason to doubt, because so many crazy things have happened. What I will say is that he did these airstrikes having alerted the Russians to it. You know, they call it deconflicting, but it's certainly known that the Russians, who of course are backing Assad, would have alerted the Syrians to this and allowed the Syrians to get out of place before these airstrikes happened. So, you know, while you can on the one hand say that, yes, President Trump did send a strong message, at the same time it was a message where the consequences for the Russians and the Syrians were reduced, that's for sure.
Yeah, and David Corn, they use weapons that won't harm the runways of that airfield. They know exactly how much they're limiting the damage to the airfield. You could go on and on about it, but if Vladimir Putin wants the Trump presidency to succeed so that he can manipulate the Trump presidency, Vladimir Putin is going to have to find ways to help him out.
Well, yes, and perhaps, you know, there's talk about working on the sanctions if the Russians don't overreact. But the word I'm thinking about tonight, Lawrence, begins with F, and that's feckless. Because you know, if Obama had done anything like this, a minimum impact launch with telling the Russians, and it's a good thing you tell the Russians first so it doesn't escalate, and that, you know, the next day, as was reported today, the Syrians are back using the same airbase to launch strikes against civilian targets and rebels, that the Republicans and the right would be calling Obama feckless, as their favorite word for him. This didn't really matter, really didn't do anything, didn't really signal much. And so I do think, while a lot of pundits, as you noted, went overboard last night and, you know, called him presidential, there's a lot to settle about this one episode. And I don't think, you know, a few days from now, a week or two from now, it may not look as glorious and thus as smart, if inspired by Putin, as it might look last night and this morning.